We're going to be talking about the new Revit and Inventor operability, which is going to allow us to actually reference in a Revit file, which will then allow us to utilize Inventor to create more or less the mechanical type product that we're going to be using today. In our demonstration, Anthony's going to be the architect, the Revit user, and he's going to be creating has created a townhome, and then once he's completed that, I'm going to actually take that file and bring it into Inventor, where I'm going to be the Inventor user, where I specialize in creating balconies, and I'm going to use Inventor to create that and place that and reference that Revit model that Anthony has created. Okay, Anthony, you there?
Hey, Jason, I'm chatting with him and trying to figure out what might be going on.
Okay.
Just a second.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. Sorry about that. That was stressful, but we're on board now. Okay. So, So thank you, Jason. I appreciate the introduction and setting the stage. So the idea here is that as the architect, I've got this townhome project, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen so that you can get a first look at this inside of. You can actually get a first look at this inside of my Revit project that I'm working in. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to just show it to you. And then I'm going to send it to Jason. And the idea here is that I've got this project, and I want to work with Jason as the product manufacturer for this balcony. Jason, can you confirm you can see my screen?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, cool. Awesome. All right, so basically what I've done is I've got this project here, and Jason has, as a product manufacturer, he's got this balcony product, this modular balcony, and I've created these placeholders that I'm going to use to kind of represent where these balconies are in my project. But really what I want to do ultimately is send this file to Jason so that he can work with this. Now, in the past, in a more traditional workflow, as of like even last year, what we would probably do to provide Jason with the requisite information to place and locate everything that he needs, I would have to go in and go through a long-term process of exporting out a CAD format. And if you've ever played around with Revit and the DWG export functionality, it's fairly powerful, but it also has some limitations. There's some things that we have to just contend with in general, because Revit is not CAD, it's a BIM authoring tool. So if we're able to include all of that BIM data and share that directly with Jason, the manufacturer, we're going to be able to really be better able to collaborate. So the way this is going to work is we're going to take advantage of BIM 360. So I've actually set this up as a BIM 360 design project. And we can see this if I go to the Collaborate tab. And if I were to synchronize with Central, I would be publishing up to the cloud. Now let me jump into my BIM 360 here. You'll notice that I've actually got a project loaded already. This applied software townhome project is set up and it's ready for Jason to go. So at this point, what I'm doing is I'm going to invite Jason to the project and say, Jason, can you take this Revit model and start to produce, these balconies? So I don't have any changes that I need to synchronize up to Central at this point. So Jason, if you want, you can go ahead and take what I produced here and you can show what is happening from the Inventor side.
Okay, perfect. So give me a minute here and let's. Anthony, just let me know when you can see my screen.
You look good.
Screen.
All right. So on the Inventor side, I'm going to go through the process of bringing in that Revit model. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to start an assembly file. And to place that Revit model, I'm going to come up here and we're going to place imported CAD file. And where we're looking at now is that synced BIM 360 drive. Okay, and here's the townhome Anthony was speaking about. And you'll notice here within this is starting to utilize the AnyCAD technology. I have two options here. I can either reference the model in, which would keep that link between Anthony's Revit model, so any changes he makes will then in turn show on the Inventor side. But I can also convert this to an actual Inventor model. If I would do that, that would actually break the link. So any updates that he would do, I wouldn't see them. Okay, and then down here at the bottom, you'll notice we have different views that we can select that Anthony has set up. And the nice thing about this is I'm going to be bringing in a view that he has called Inventor View. But think about this. If I'm on the manufacturing side and I only need a portion of this townhome, he could go in and create a view only showing me the elements that I need to create my design. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and start the process here. And depending on the size of your file, might take a couple minutes. But remember, we are wanting to show this to you live so you can get an idea of the time that it takes.
I think it's worth mentioning, Jason, that as you're importing this, what we are doing is we're literally taking that model that I saved up to the BIM 360 project.
Correct. Okay. So you'll notice that over here in my model browser, we got some icons that are going to show up beside of our models. Notice I have a little cloud icon here. This is letting me know that this is a cloud file. So let's see the type of information that was brought over. So all of Anthony's Revit information, you'll see all these categories here. And when I start expanding those out, then I'll start seeing the parts. So you can see it's brought over all this information. Okay. So let's go through the process now. Is I actually have a balcony that I have created, but I'm going to use Anthony's model here to place this. Okay. And I'm just placing in a work plane here, so I can center up my balcony in regards to his geometry here. Okay, go ahead, Anthony.
I was just going to clarify. So what you're doing is you're actually locking something inside of the Inventor. You're actually locking to an element inside of the architectural model that you brought in.
That is correct. And the reason I'm doing that is because if Anthony would make any kind of changes here with the placement that I'm placing this balcony, if this has a relationship, let's say to the doors here, and if he needs to relocate them or whatnot, then my model will actually move with it.
Well,
okay, I'm just going to go
don't tell the architects that.
I'm going to go in and just go ahead and normal constraints.
You're doing all this work, and I'm already plotting up a bunch of changes.
Oh, there we go. Okay. So I've got that located. And then once I get my balcony in there, I can come in and maybe I want to toggle off some of the stuff that he's showing here, just so I can get a better idea of my placement. Yeah, and that looks pretty good. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and save this. Just going to go ahead and call it just Townhome.
And what are you saving out when you do that?
I'm saving it out as an assembly file, an IAM.
And what actual components are being saved out when you do that? Am I saving out that entire Revit model with it, or just the Inventor geometry?
Yeah. So it's saving out the Inventor geometry, but it's also saving that referenced model with the inside of that assembly file.
Gotcha.
Okay. So, Anthony, you mentioned some changes happening.
Yeah, I couldn't help it, man. You started talking about it was easy to accept changes from the architect, so I was thinking, why don't I challenge you on that?
Okay.
So what I'm going to do you mind if I start sharing my screen again?
Yeah, go ahead.
Awesome. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. And just let me know when that starts sharing. All right, so what I'm going to do here is I'm essentially going to come in. I'm going to move some stuff around. I'm just going to move over, maybe I'll move this over a foot or something to that effect. And honestly, I could go nuts with whatever I want here. But I'm just going to say I'm moving this over from what it originally was. And then I'm going to synchronize and publish this up to the cloud. So what the idea here is that, remember, in BIM 360 as an architect, if I were to save something, synchronizing is just saving an internal model. So after I synchronize, I need to make sure and publish so that Jason can actually receive these changes. So to publish, I could come up here to the Manage Cloud Models. There's also a kind of a faster way of doing this. If you go up to your Home tab, you have the ability to hit Publish from here. Now, it looks like it's taking just a second to process, so I might need to wait. But the idea is that once I hit Publish, I can then go up into BIM 360, and you'll notice that it increments up to a version 3. And at this point, we're actually able to get a new version that Jason can use. So now he's got a version 3 available. And I confess, I just cheated and I made the change prior to showing my screen. But I've already made that change, and I've actually moved this stuff around already. So Jason, if you want to actually show what happens on your end, we can kind of show the room what's going on.
Okay.
All right, I see your screen.
All right. All right, so one key thing here is, just to point this out, for mine to update on my end, I need to actually have the file closed out, okay? So what version did you say we were up to now, Anthony?
We should be up to version 3.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So let's see what happens whenever I open this.
This is where we do the fingers crossed, because in our testing, it hasn't all been smooth sailing. I'll say that.
Okay. So on this one, and I'm looking at my status on my end. It looks like mine hasn't synced yet.
So I think that is kind of it's worth bringing that up as a discussion point. But to really make this thing work, we need to understand how the desktop connector works. So inside of BIM 360, and for the audience, if you're familiar with BIM 360, you probably are aware of this desktop connector. But what it does is it basically allows the user, the end user, to have a direct connection to BIM 360 inside of their directory, inside of their file explorer. So when files are added up to BIM 360, they're actually going to be loaded down into your computer. But one challenge is that the desktop connector sometimes is a little bit slow. And so when a change happens from the Revit side, the Inventor side, since the technology is still so new, sometimes it takes just a little bit of effort to get it to kickstart and to get it to recognize that there's a new file version up in BIM 360 that needs to be copied down to Jason's computer.
Still not synced yet.
Still hasn't synced. Do you want to check what does it look like on the BIM 360 site? Do you have that updated there? All right, it does look like it's updated there.
Yep, it's updated there. Not updated on my local. And actually the status is showing what we've seen before was stale. Okay. Let me do this. There we go. Notice that down here at the bottom now. Bottom right,
updating.
transferring files. Let's see what happens. Okay, perfect. It says synced. So you can see it takes just a little bit for it to update that.
I think it's worth mentioning too that we're doing this live directly in front of you, but in probably a more traditional workflow, a more conventional workflow that we would see this happening is the architect sends over, updates these files, and then maybe the next day Jason's team starts working on it.
Right, and I want you to notice here that it has recognized that changes have been made. And you'll see the lightning bolts over here in regards to his Revit model. That needs to be updated. So let's go ahead and say yes.
We're just building the hype now. Okay. Check that out. It changed. It updated. Maybe we should have done something a little bit more dramatic for dramatic effect, but That's pretty cool.
Like maybe, yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, what if, I mean, I think the concept is pretty effectively demonstrated here, but, you know, we could also look at resizing. You know, what if I resize the balcony and I also take out those 2 windows to the left of that middle balcony?
Yeah. Yeah, that way, because, you know, how much did you move it over?
Oh, just a couple of feet.
Okay.
Not a bunch.
All right. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. Are you making those changes?
I am making those changes and publishing right now. So probably if we have a stopwatch, it'll take a few minutes to get to you, but that's all right.
Yeah, so let's keep an eye on it up here. Let's see what we got.
So I think, you know...
Yeah, go ahead.
That's actually not it. I confess I synced again, but this is going to be another synchronized.
Okay.
But I think it's worth, as we kind of wait for the publishing action to happen, just to kind of talk about this workflow and give a little bit more of a background to it and where we kind of see it right now. Because, you know, this was first introduced as a functionality inside of the 21 Revit and the 21 Inventor. This is not a workflow that is possible in an earlier version of either of those softwares. You have to be in Revit 2021 at a minimum, and the same for Inventor. And I would tell you that when this first came out, there were some challenges, some technical difficulties, and this is just kind of a part of such a brand new workflow. Is there are some things that are still being ironed out. We're still learning about certain pieces and trying to figure out the best practices for how this is going to work. So, you know, I think that disclaimer is worth putting out there, you know, and we're doing this live, so. All right, looks like it's still publishing, huh?
It is. I'm keeping an eye on my drive as well while it's doing this. And the nice thing is, too, if you've never utilized or haven't messed with this new workflow in 21 yet, we still have the older capability as well. So let's just say if Anthony needed my balcony model, I have that capability with Inventor to export that out using the BIM exchange. So I can either export it out as a Revit family, or I can also send him the other version, which is the ADSK file format.
And that's been out for a couple of years now, right? I think 2019 versions had that first supported?
Yes.
So I don't think we'll demonstrate that piece of the puzzle since that's been out for a while, but it is worth acknowledging that everything that Jason is doing, I could actually, we can bring that into the Revit project. So if I wanted to do any kind of visualization or coordination, clash work, anything like that, I can bring exactly what he has directly into my Revit project. I'm going to give it another shot here.
Yep, it's still waiting for it to sync on my local.
Okay. If anyone's watching and you're wondering what needs to happen here, keep refreshing your drive on your desktop connector. That's what you got to do.
Yeah, so you can see my screen here. I'm waiting for that to say synced before I try to open it back up again.
you can also see the discrepancy in the versions, that it's a version 4, but up on the BIM 360 website, it's going to say version 5. So if you think about what's happening here, it's relaying from my computer up to the cloud, and then the desktop connector on Jason's computer is pulling it down. So it has to upload and then download, which is kind of where the time is coming from. All right, so it looks like the version incremented, so you're good to go?
It did. It version incremented, and the status should change here in a second.
All right, well, let's go see what I did.
Yeah, let's see if it's ready yet. It's telling me the correct version, but it's still saying the status is stale.
Hopefully that's okay. That probably just means that it's pulled down the latest, and it's no longer, it's not like a live link so that it's going to immediately receive those changes.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, no, it didn't work.
Yeah, I'm trying to rush it.
So I think one thing this demonstrates is this isn't facilitating a workflow. You know, inside of Revit, we can have multiple users collaborating in the file at the same time, and then pretty much instantaneously every user sees the changes that the other users are making when they synchronize. Now, this Inventor Revit workflow is translating between two pretty different programs, and we're going through the desktop connector up to BIM 360. So I think it's, at this point in time, definitely does not facilitate a instantaneous workflow of immediately seeing the changes, but you'll, as we've kind of demonstrated, and hopefully as we'll demonstrate here in a minute, it is able to receive those changes within a relatively short amount of time.
Yeah, and I think also to point out, so you might have a company that has mixed disciplines. You might have some Revit users and Inventor users. So we're using the BIM 360, but if we were pulling this information from like the company network, it would be quicker.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. So do you want to try one more time? And I mean, we've seen it work, even though it wasn't very dramatic. I don't think this example will be super dramatic either, but it's a little bit more obvious what happened.
And I think something too is, you know, the internet speed can play a factor in this as well.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that assessment. More speed is better, but ultimately, if you have an internet connection, even if it's not the best, this can work. It's just simply a matter of getting it to complete the download and the upload. So is it still trying to update?
Yeah, so here, I went into my pending actions for my desktop connector, and I saw that there was 2 that were hung up here, so I just applied those actions again to see if that would clear this out. Now we have it. Look here. Synced, version 5. So let's see what happens now.
All right, moment of truth.
There we have it.
Awesome. So basically, that dialog window pops up every time it recognizes a change has been made in the model.
Correct. And while this is open, and some key companies that I could see that could benefit from this would be like possibly some curtain wall manufacturers. Wouldn't you agree, Anthony?
Oh, definitely. I can think of several partners of ours that absolutely would, in the curtain wall space, and really in that whole architectural fabrication, the product fabrication for architects and buildings, really, I see this as having some interesting potential, and I'm excited to see what the industry kind of comes up with.
Mm-hmm. So it looks like we can see those changes. You took out 2 of those windows and also moved the doors over to the left.
I sure did. That's pretty slick. So, I mean, I think maybe what we should do, we did it, guys. We presented a live workthrough of this, which people told us was a bad idea, but we did it anyways. But let's just maybe, Jason, let's just talk through just conceptualizing this workflow again. What's happening is, as the architect, I'm able to go nuts and make my changes, do my things in my model. And in a traditional CAD workflow, I would have to, every time I make changes, I need to produce new CAD backgrounds. There's ways to get the 3D model, but it wasn't an intelligent process. But so now I'm simply, by virtue of synchronizing and publishing, I can distribute this model with no extra effort on my end. And then from Jason's side, if we think about the implications here, this is really powerful because as I make changes in a traditional workflow inside of Inventor and other similar applications, you're looking at this reality that you're going to have to manually adjust your elements, right? You're going to have to manually move that balcony. If I were to resize the balcony, he would have to manually resize it. And this workflow allows us to have this really intelligent link into the architect model to help facilitate some small amount of automation for the product design.
Absolutely.
I'm not going to try to estimate the hours saved, but I think that there are some real time savings benefits that could be realized with this workflow.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, I think that's really the of our presentation. So unless you have anything else you want to cover, Jason, do we want to kind of open this up to questions from the audience?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see if they got any questions for us.
All right, I'll check and see real quick. Looks like there's nothing in the Q&A box. So if anybody has any questions right now, I'll give you about like 15 seconds to type that out. And then we can say goodbye for the day.
Awesome. Well, I would also say, this is something that's, as a technology, is still developing. It's not, just kind of as a closing statement here, it's not a finished product. We've been in conversations with Autodesk and the dev team. This is something that they're continuing to develop. They're continuing to expand on. So where it stands today is already, as a proof of concept, can do some really powerful things. But there's some other stuff coming down in the pipeline, which I think will continue to round out this workflow and continue to give it a little bit more power and impact for the end user.